Welcome to the show. I have on my glasses. If you're watching the video of this, I have on my glasses because I put my glasses on for a second because when I'm talking to smart people, I think it makes me look smarter. And Josh Bains is one of the smartest people I know. And I've got to know him over the last couple of minutes and he will downplay it. But I'm telling you, by the end of this episode, you'll go, well, yeah, you're right. He is really, really smart. Because that's just who he is. He's a writer, and we're going to get into what he writes and the tome of ghostwriting. How are you today, my friend?
I am great. You've been getting to know me longer than a few minutes.
I said a few months. I didn't say a few minutes. A few months.
A few months. I heard minutes.
Okay, you're cutting down on my smart thing. You know, me talking to you about, you're cutting down on that. You're lowering the bar.
I was just trying to help you out, Gary. I want to make room for you.
Let me tell you stuff. Josh, as I have got to know him, has led one of the most interesting lives. When you sit back and if you watch the video of this, because we are offering video now, and you'll see Josh is a very nice, pleasant man, but you wouldn't look at this guy and go, well, he's lived a hell of a life, but he has. Before we get into what you do, can we talk a little about you? Because I find that fascinating. The journey you went on, right? Born in New York. Is that right?
No, in California.
You were born in California. I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Riverside.
Wow. Riverside. Do you know the software?
Have you heard of Riverside?
Do you know the software I'm using right now to record this?
Is Riverside.
It's called
I think
Riverside.
Of my hometown every time I see the Riverside title. I'm happy it's now an app. It's ubiquitous.
How long were you in Riverside?
My whole life, same house, up until when my dad retired, and I had already graduated college. So 23. I lived on campus, but 23, and then they moved to Washington State.
Where did you go to school?
I went undergrad to University of Redlands.
Redlands?
It's on the way to Palm Springs. If you're going I was just talking to somebody from Los Angeles, and like, this is all the stuff you drive past on the way to Palm Springs. That's where I'm from.
Hey, listen, we call those dots on a map, right? I'm from a dot on a map myself. That, if you tell people, you have to define it for them, just like you do the University of Redlands.
Yeah. Warren Christopher, Secretary of State, graduated. He graduated from my alma mater. And Riverside is famous for, it's not famous for it, but I think every president since Roosevelt has stayed at the Mission Inn, which is it's like a great hotel that is in Riverside. Riverside was on the map in the 1800s for orange groves, and it was a spring kind of it was a place that you go to get. There's like a fancy name for that, but it was a resort out towards the desert. And when you had rheumatism or you had something ailing you, you would go there, and it was this resort kind of environment that was in the middle of nowhere.
What did they call that? It was like it started with a C, didn't it, or something like that? Because they had them in Georgia. Remember, that's where Roosevelt, right?
Yeah,
because he had polio, and they had these things that they. Okay, people are going to email me, I know, because I've forgotten, but it has that name, and suppose it has these I say mystical qualities because they had hot springs.
Oh, okay.
Anything.
Well, I don't think they were. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying anything that had heat, right? Because the one you're talking about was near a desert. So there's.
Well, I don't think it was. I don't think there's Palm Springs, and I don't know if there are springs in Palm Springs. As far as I know, we now have a water crisis partly because of Palm Springs. So I don't know what the originality of water is in the area, and the same with Riverside. What I know is that it had a good temperate climate that was not too hot and not too cold, and they could grow oranges there. And so they started. They brought in I think it was like the navel orange, and they started. It became the place that was in the United States, along with Florida, that grew oranges. And there were at a certain point, thousands and thousands of trees, which now we just have. They've cut most of them down. They've got a few left at Citrus State Historic Park, which is in Riverside, and it's nice, worth a visit if you're there. And so Mission Inn, and Citrus State Historic Park. So I was a history major. I was a double major in history and theater at the University of Redlands. So that's why I speak this way about the history of Riverside, and I get excited about it, and nobody else really does.
I love history. I was an English lit major. Ask which one of us is the writer, not me. But I love history. That's what I was saying is when you sit back, like everybody knows history. When it comes to oranges, the oranges you buy in Florida are the ones you drink. The ones you buy in California are the ones you eat.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I was, when you were sent back saying all the presidents, and I'm like, when you said that, I'm like, well, how far are you from San Clemente?
I'd have to look at a map.
So it's not close. That would be my situation. Because you were saying it's on the way from Los Angeles to, the things you drive
to
Palm Springs. And I don't know where San Clemente was, which of course was Richard Nixon's compound.
Oh, okay.
So he was one of the few, him and Reagan were one of the few people I think who retired in California.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Reagan had a ranch in Colorado, in California.
Yeah. So when he was done, he retired. And, Nixon was a senator from California. So,
right.
But California, for all its bigness, hasn't produced a lot in presidential politics.
That makes sense. Are we going there?
Am I scaring you?
I don't have a lot to say about it. Like I've been so focused on what I'm working on and what I do, and my family and, my stuff, that I won't be able to speak eloquently about whatever is going on in politics.
No. I wasn't going to talk about what I was talking history of politics.
Okay.
The history of politics.
Maybe all the more, I don't know if I could do that either.
And that's okay. Cause what I really wanted to get, because it was the journey and you told me about, you majored and then you decided to travel.
Yeah. So, when I went to the University of Redlands, they've got a great study abroad program. My uncle went there. And so I guess I was a legacy, and is what they call it. So despite any of my own record, I got in, and I was very interested in the school. I wanted to be a theater major, and they didn't really have a theater major. They had a theater program, but not a major. But they had extraordinary study abroad program. And I just wanted that. And I wanted very much to go to Scotland. And I played the bagpipes. And
shut up.
Yeah.
Really?
You just took the glasses off.
Yeah, because I was tired of seeing my reflection in my glasses. So I'm like, wow, you learned to play the bagpipes?
Yes. So I can tell you the story. I was at a Boy Scout camporee when I was 17. And there was a man in a kilt and a scout uniform playing the bagpipes under a tree. And my dad said, why don't you talk to him? So I went and spoke to him. And by the end of the conversation, I was signed up for lessons. And his name was Mike Terry. And that was in Riverside. And I went once a week and got bagpipe lessons. And that had a big influence on me. And I don't know exactly how it came about that I got this feeling of wanting to go to Scotland. And I guess as I write my book, I would say something about, at one point he said, for some people, bagpipes is, an avocation. And for other people, it's blood. And I said, what is it for me? He said, for you, it's blood. So there could be, a Scottish ancestor back there, with the Bains. And either my last name Bains I always say it's either Scottish for, from the clan McBain, which is a sept of the Mackay clan. And it means son of the lively one, or it's French and it means bathroom. So it's one of the two. So I prefer the Scottish variant.
Maybe a mix. Maybe it's the son of the lively bathroom. I don't know. Or what the hell is my son doing in the bathroom? Maybe it's that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. You are the only person I've ever known of who's taken bagpipe lessons. I've lived a long time, and I've never met anyone who's taken bagpipe lessons.
Right. Well, we're out there. And if you start looking around, you'll see there are plenty of pipers around. And piping is actually integral to my journey. One, because it probably gave me the wherewithal to choose Scotland first. And so I ended up studying abroad. I went to the University of Redlands. I took advantage of the study abroad program. I went to the University of Glasgow my junior year. And had an amazing time and all of the things that you do. So I chose as my theme for that at a certain point, I felt like this is the first time that I've really been alone. I've really been on my own. And I had this feeling that I wanted, I chose a theme. And the theme for that period of my life in Scotland was solitude. And I wanted to go and experience myself in this place and do something that was quote unquote great for me. And so I had the idea, I want to see the whole country. I want to travel. And how can I do it? And I thought, a bicycle. I'll get a bicycle and I'll bicycle around Scotland. And so I got a bicycle and I was able to get enough resources together so that during the summer, I cycled around Scotland for about 5 weeks, and visited, and a bunch of funny stories, along the way for that. I was calling that kind of period like Bagpipes and a bicycle. And at one point I was in the Outer Hebrides, which are there's the Highlands and the islands. And so the Outer Hebrides are islands that are way off. And you get to them and you're just out there. You're just flat and you just really are remote. And I had been hearing, this is kind of my personality. I'd been hearing this sound in my bicycle and I wasn't sure what it was, but I didn't really stop to figure it out. I'll just keep going. And then finally I just like, that sound doesn't sound good. Now I had my bicycle with panniers and and it was a tent and there was stuff. So the whole backside of the bicycle had been completely overloaded, or what I thought was simply loaded. And then I was looking around the back wheel and then what is it? And I put my hand and then the spokes just fell apart like teeth falling out. And I just thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm in the middle of the most godforsaken nowhere. It's like flat. There's like mountains on that side, and then eventually there's ocean on that side, and there's still ocean on the other side, and the ferry's gone, and I'm in the middle of this strip of nowhere on a road, and it's always raining, and so I was on the way to visit somebody from Glasgow Uni, from the university I was friendly with. He said, "Oh, if you're ever in my neighborhood, look me up." So I was walking sadly my bicycle and
with a wet bagpipe.
Right. Yeah. I didn't take the bagpipes. I wanted to take them, but I was just afraid they get destroyed on the trip.
Thank God for small favors.
Right. And, finally there's a truck passes by and slows down, the truck slows down and says, "Hey, you need help? What's going on?" I said, "Yeah, I'm looking for, a guy. I'm trying to visit my friend Derek." And then they say, "McLean." And they say, "We'll take you to his house." And they said, "Get in." So wow. I got in the back of the truck and they drove me right to his house and all was saved. And then there was a bike shop right there on the island. I got my bike fixed the next day. And he played bagpipes really well. He's a really proper piper. And so in the evening, he played the bagpipes. And then the next day we worked in the sheep croft that his father owned. And so it was a cool trip. But
man,
I could keep going. But you're running the show.
No, it's because it's such a fun, because you've only touched on a few parts of your life, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do this, and again, we'll get around to talking about ghostwriting, but I just found your story because you had broached on it once upon a time that this travel led you back to your faith.
Yes. Yeah. I guess I have a way that I tell the story, and
he's written a book, by the way. You should read it.
Remind me which one. So along the way, I guess there's multiple layers to this story. And so if I go back in time, I grew up knowing that I'm Jewish. My mother always told me that, "Hey, you're Jewish. We're Jewish." And her mother died when she was 14. And so she grew up not associated or really knowledgeable about it in any way. except knowing that she was Jewish, and she did the same thing and told me, okay, you're Jewish. And that's all that I knew. And apparently that's enough, or almost enough. When I got into middle school, she started showing me documentaries on the Holocaust. And that was the sum total of my Jewish education. And for somebody who's Orthodox, that's insane. Like that's very off the beaten path. And when I look back at it, it is remarkable that of what I ended up doing was unique. Although I'm definitely not the only person that has done what I did, which is to find my way back with that little amount of information. But that documentary that I saw for some reason over and over again, like I saw it with my parents, and then I saw it with like friends, like, hey, come over, let's watch this great documentary, like horrible documentary. And then we went to and I was in history. So my history class, like I told my history teacher about it in middle school. He said, oh, let's watch it. As we watched it in my history class. So it got into me a little bit. And when I went to, when I was thinking about, like, I want to go to, I'm in Glasgow Uni, and I have a spring break. I want to go to Europe. Here I am. I want to go to Europe. So, my one thought of where I knew that I wanted to go was Auschwitz. That was I wanted to see a lot of things, but where I needed to go, I needed the trip to take me to Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. And I had a bunch of other funny experiences in Europe. I was on the train it led me to, I think it's pronounced Ostwiecim. And I'm in Poland. I'm sitting across from, I don't know if I should tell this story. I'm sitting across from a Polish person and an Austrian person, and they're both music students studying at a conservatory in Vienna. And they say, "What brings you to Poland?" And I said, I was a stupid American. I said, "Oh, Auschwitz." And the Polish guy explodes, and he says, "There's more to Poland than Auschwitz." And I go, "Sorry, I'm just a silly American." I didn't say that, but looking back on it, of course he would say that. Of course, there's more to the country than that. But for many Jewish people, there's not, and there's really nothing more than Auschwitz and every other death camp that was there. And it's weird when you go, because there's actually houses which are not for like it. I'm pretty sure that things are as they were, and so when you get off the train and you walk through the town, and then you get to the edge of the buildings, and then there's a field, and then there's that famous gate. Mm-hmm. And so when you walk that way, there's houses here. They're old houses, and you can just see it right there. So it made me just curious of that this was all just like imagine having your house be, a couple football fields away from, the most evil place on the planet. Mm-hmm. That's what was happening. And I'm not saying anything to begrudge anybody, because I don't know what I would have done if I was in that situation. And how are you going to fight against that, for those people that would have a thought of fighting? But it was a remarkable, experience, and I don't want to, there's no way to actually put words to it. Mm-hmm. When you go through that place. And there's actually two camps. There's Auschwitz 1 and Auschwitz 2, and there's like a kind of a highway in between, and you visit each one, and you see the shoes, and you see the piles, and you see the rubble, and you see the graves, and you see the ponds that are filled with people. Mm-hmm. And everything is just signs. I was taking pictures of signs, and this pointed to that, and there's X number of hundreds or thousands here, and there's X number of hundreds or thousands here. So I was crying at some point, and it was a moving experience, so that when I left, I tend to think, well, how do I solidify this? How do I turn this into something for going forward? And I thought, I've met a lot of dead Jews. I'd like to meet some living ones. Mm. And that's the thought that I took away, that I need to do something. I need to go out and meet somebody. Because up until then, I hadn't really. So I had a professor, my senior year. That was my junior year in college. My senior year, I'm back in California, and I meet a professor, and she was Jewish, and we got along nicely, and it it came out that she was Jewish and I was Jewish, and we started talking about it. And that was the first time that I ever had a conversation with somebody who was Jewish, about Judaism.
About Judaism. Wow.
Yeah. It had just never been available before.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't tell me very much, but anything at that point was,
more than you had.
Like a lot.
Mm.
Yes. And so although she wasn't that relatively observant, certainly to what I am now, by no way at all, she told me about something called the Jewish Book of Why, which is this English book that it talks about. It answers questions of different things about what we do. And then she talked about something called a Passover Seder, and I had never heard of a Passover. I had never really heard of Passover. I definitely had not heard the word Seder, and that's all I heard. So, fast forward, I worked on a cattle ranch, and I went to, I
love the way you just throw that out there. I worked on a cattle ranch. I mean, I'm on a bicycle and thinking about my bagpipes in England. And then I went and had this immensely emotional thing, and it reconnected me. And then I worked on a cattle ranch, and then. Right. So I was applying for a Rotary ambassadorial scholarship, which, a friend of mine from college, her father was a big guy in the Rotary. His name was Mike Chilcote, and I think what I heard was behind the scenes, he made stuff happen. Yeah.
To make sure I got it. And he's in the Big Bear Rotary, Big Bear, California.
Yeah.
So I got this Rotary ambassadorial scholarship to study at the University of Hong Kong. And my thought process there was that I had already been in Europe and Scotland, and I wanted to experience something very different, but I'm not great with languages, so it needed to be an English-speaking place. So the top choices were Australia or India or Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was the best, and I was able to get that one for a journalism program at the University of Hong Kong on Pak Phulam Road, and that's in Hong Kong Island. And so I spent a year there, and half the year I lived on campus, and the other half I was doing my master's thesis in journalism on urbanization in hill tribes, or the traditional village areas of Hong Kong. And so we're used to pictures of Hong Kong where all these skyscrapers and all of that is built on old stuff. So there are efforts to retain the authentic village character of Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
And in certain ways, there's, it's unique because Mao came in like in the middle of the last century and started destroying, religion. So all of the traditional religious areas in China were scuttled, or they in different ways they were put down. Hong Kong, being a British colony, was saved from that. And so there are actually interesting, authentic, traditional areas that are in Hong Kong that you might not necessarily find in other parts of China. So I was doing my thesis about that, and it was all very alien to me, which is what I wanted. I wanted a really different thing. But I guess I had this tuning so that I thought, if I really want to understand people, I need to get what they believe. So that drew me to religion. It drew me to the religious practices of the Hong Kongese. And I was studying it. I found a book which was like occult practice in Hong Kong. And then I had my advisor for the Rotary Scholarship, who was Hong Kongese herself. So I say, do you have anything, I asked, do you have anything interesting, traditional that I could come see or do? And she said, well, there is this practice that it's very different, but, she said and she started to describe it. And I said, oh, is it called Fouquet? And she said, yes. And she was totally shocked that I had heard of what this thing was, but because of this book. So it's a Taoist ceremony, which I do not fully understand. And I don't mean to malign anybody over here as I describe what I experienced, but you go into one of these skyscrapers and you go up to an apartment building, and the apartment building is a temple. It's a little mini temple, which means that there's an altar, and then next to it, there's a card table with guys who are like kibitzing, like they're just hanging out and they're eating or drinking or something like that. So it's very low key. But there's this huge altar that's there, and there's a lady who is some type of priestess, and she communicates with either deceased relatives or gods, and she does it with a sandbox, which is in front of the altar, and she has a stick. Now, anybody who's actually knows about this can actually say properly what these things are that I'm describing, but this is my white perception. And she ask a question. I ask a question. They translate it into Chinese, hand it to the woman. She reads the question, and then she asks it in some way. And then when she starts writing on the sand, that's the response from those powers. And I asked, what's the best way for me to spend my time in Hong Kong? And then there was a pause. She said something, did something. All of a sudden there's this and she's writing in the sand furiously. And then, it's kind of like getting your stock report. And then it comes out, they write it down. They talk to the person that can speak English, tell me. And they said, it would be well with you to study Taoism. And I thought, that's all of that for like, just tell me to like learn your religion is what, like, this is how you try to convert me.
Look, you got spammed. So,
yeah. So that was my experience with Fouquet. And I'm trying to remember why so in other words, everything in Hong Kong was fairly alien, even though it's a British colony. So it's English and you can live there, as a white person, who does not speak, Guangdonghua, Cantonese. So I was walking down the street one day on Hong Kong Island, past from the university around the island. And then I see there's this old building that looks totally different from the skyscrapers and everything else. And I'm looking at it and I don't know what I'm seeing. It's just this interesting, beautiful looking, and I don't know the architectural style that it's in, but it's very different. And I admit potentially European or Western. And then I look closer and I see a Magen David. I see a Star of David, and I realize I'm looking at a synagogue. And I walk down, everything's on a mountain. So I walk down into that space and down into the courtyard. And then I just like, wow, I'm looking at a synagogue. And then I go and the doors open and I walk inside, totally empty. And I just start wandering around. And as I'm walking around and I'm seeing the what is called the Ezras Nashim, or the women's section, and I'm seeing all this woodwork and this incredible architecture, the thought that struck me was, oh, this is me. And I don't think I would have had that thought if I hadn't have been surrounded by so much alien activity to me in Hong Kong. But because I was steeped in the villages and all this stuff that I really didn't understand or necessarily have any business being in, it gave me this, what's the word? A relief, or there's a literary term for when there's opposites. A foil. It was a foil to my, what I really am. It showed me that, like, no, this is actually you. And I went to the calendar. There's a calendar. I looked at the calendar and I saw Passover was coming up. And I remembered that professor that I had at the University of Redlands who talked about a Passover Seder. And so I said, I'll go to that. Like, that'll be like, I can do something. So I went to that, and the rabbi, now, even though he was conservative, there was something about me, I guess. So there are different strata of levels of, Jewish religious observance. And so this particular rabbi, he knew a lot, and probably in different points in his life, he had been more observant, or maybe he still was observant, but he was in practice over a group of people who were less observant. So you would have expected him to give me some potentially less observant advice, but instead he gave me more observant advice when he seemingly like looked at me and talked to me, and he said, you should learn Hebrew and go to Israel. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And that put Israel on my map, which had never been at all before. And the idea that there's something that way. And a little while later, I was at the student union at the University of Hong Kong. And I'm sorry you're not doing much talking here, Gary.
No, this is for the favorite kind of, I love listening because I love this story, and I am fascinated. I am absolutely riveted.
All right. So I was walking through they had a book fair, at the Hong Kong University Student Union, and I'm looking at the books, and then I see a book which is by Amos Oz, In the Land of Israel, and I think, oh, this is for me. And I bought the book, and I started reading the book, and I saw at the beginning it talked about this area called Mea Sharim, which is somewhere in Jerusalem. And there are these posters up, and there are these people that don't like these people, and they think that they're doing the wrong thing. And they're upset because there's a band which is called the Diaspora Yeshiva Band, and they're playing music, and it's bad, and you shouldn't be part of it. He's painting the scene of Jerusalem, of religious life in Jerusalem, and he himself is very, very, very famously secular. And so it was somebody said this might be the only time that Amos Oz wrote something that actually made somebody become more observant. Not that he was trying to do that. But in Israel, things are very polarized, more so than in the United States generally. And everybody's living with each other, and it's an intense place. So in Hong Kong, I'm reading this book about Israel, and I'm told by this rabbi that I should learn Hebrew and go there. And I'm thinking, I'm doing journalism. I really want to do that. So Israel's the perfect place to be in the Middle East and do reporting in the Middle East. That sounds great. So that gives me that idea. And then in the meantime, then I go to Thailand. I do an internship at the Nation newspaper in Thailand. And there I go to the Chabad house in Thailand. So Chabad is the organization which, they do outreach. They do Jewish outreach, and they're everywhere in the world. You go any city or non-city, like villages, you'll find Chabad people. And there are many of them catered to Israelis, because Israelis are famous for traveling. When they get out of the army, they all go traveling. So the Chabad is there to give them a place, as well. And that actually wasn't good for me, because this was a very Israeli, an Israeli catering Chabad. So when I came in, and I just, like in Israeli, they're not looking for, they already know a lot, or they don't know, they think they know. And here I just come in, I'm just white and earnest. And I just like, hey, like, what, tell me about it. And they're like, what do we do with you? So like I'm at like, what do you do? And what is that? So I didn't learn a lot when I was there, but it was meaningful that I was there, that I was in that place. And again, in a very alien, quote unquote, place in Thailand. But I started connecting more and more, to my Jewish brethren, like as that became an idea that like I'm part of people. I'm part of a people. And then, like I was in Bangladesh. I was I've got some funny Bangladesh stories and Indian stories. And then I finally got back to California, and I'm with my parents' house, and I start like, what do? I don't have friends really. Like everything's different now. I've been away a year and a half. And I like, oh, the Jews, I'll go meet some Jews. Like, what's happening? And now I know a tiny bit more. So I look at the calendar, and I see that the holiday of Purim is coming up. And Purim is generally the most fun Jewish holiday. It's when we drink. We actually drink and like a lot. And that's part of the service, is that you actually drink and party. So if you bring somebody, like if you want to get somebody to like Judaism, just bring them on Purim. And if you want them to have a different type of, like, if you don't want them, then pick a different holiday.
Pick all the rest.
It's not all the rest, like certain ones, like the day that we're mourning for the temple, that could be a good one if you want to turn somebody. And even then, I mean, there's kind of like a holiday for every type of person. So some people that might really resonate for them to go for a different one. But this was mine. And I looked up, where there was something to do. And I found the Happy Minyan in Los Angeles, which that sounds happy. That sounds fun. So, a minyan is a group of 10 men, and they pray together. And that's that's what we're supposed to be doing when we pray, is to have this group together of men. So the Happy Minyan, like perfect. I went in, and, where I thought it was supposed to be in like West Road in Pico Robertson neighborhood in Los Angeles. And, all I see is like the women are over here, and the men are all over here, and they're wearing suits, and they're very, and they all are like reading from, the scrolls called the Megillah, which is the Purim story, called the Book of Esther in the Bible towards the end of it. And I'm thinking, am I in the right place? Like, this seems really dour. But my next thought is, oh, this must be what Israel's like. Like, this must be different. It must be serious. It must be something else. Because this was a different kind of experience than one I'd ever had before. Definitely not like the conservative shoal in Hong Kong, where people were looking at the Orthodox people walking into the synagogue and whispering to each other, yeah, they read the whole book. Like the Passover Haggadah, it's a book that we read on Passover.
Yeah.
And for those people of lesser religious tradition, they were not going to read that whole book. Whereas we religiously read the whole book and have a great time doing it. And it's a lot of fun. So after a little while of sitting down with them and feeling uncomfortable, all of a sudden, like, a clown came in, and then other people, like crazy people, started coming in, and I realized, oh, there are different groups. And this is the Sephardic group, and they were first in the room. And then when they finished reading, then the next group was going to come in. The Happy Minion was going to come in, and then they were going to do their reading of the Megillah. So then we just had a big party, and then through that night, like, somebody was dressed up as a nun, and somebody was dressed up as, like, I don't know, like, they're crazy get-ups, and it's kind of like Halloween for adults and everybody, with a lot of alcohol, and with scriptural content as well. So I was invited for Friday night dinner, and Friday night dinner, that sounded like Friday night dinner. So it was great. It was with this wonderful family in Pacific Palisades, with a house on the cliff over the ocean. And this is great. Like, if this is where I get invited when I come and hang out with the Jews, then I'm all in. And so this part of the story, they explained to me that, okay, so we're going to have a meal, and you're going to wash your hands in a ritual way. And then we're going to sit, and we're going to break bread in a ritual way. And there's all these little things that they do, which are unique and are prescribed. And then they said, "Do you want to spend the night?" And I thought, I live in Riverside. It's an hour and a half away. It sounded like they were being nice and asking me to spend the night. And so I accepted. And then they said, "You want to come to the synagogue with us in the morning?" Okay, sure. And so I went with them in the morning. And then I was talking to a great gentleman in the back who became a friend of mine, and went through my first morning service, and they read the Torah, and then we went back and we had lunch, and that was great. And then we, in real time, I was able to find out what Shabbos was. So I didn't know that this was Shabbos. Now, Shabbos is the Jewish day of rest. It talks about that in the Bible. And the Jewish day of rest is something that we do from Friday night to Saturday day. And there are many, 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 and I can't say enough laws about how you do Shabbos. And it's what really sets people either in or out, because it's so much to take on. And so it was, so I realized people are surprised that I didn't know what Shabbos was, but I didn't know what Shabbos was. When this is, if you're going to take, like, this is the central axis. This is what everything goes around. Most people, they go to shul, they go to synagogue on what's coming up now, the high holidays. They'll go on Rosh Hashanah, they'll go on Yom Kippur, and it might be that that's the only time that they go during the year.
For Christians, it's Easter and Christmas.
Right, exactly. So for everybody else, or rather for the observant people, so then we're doing this every single week. And that becomes, it's a weekly cycle, and your whole week revolves around Shabbos. So I find it interesting, and I delve into it just, personally. Like, why is it that I found out this way? Like, why is it that my whole life I didn't know? Even when I went to the Chabad houses, and they never told me, but they just assumed that I would know. But I never knew. I never knew that this is the thing that we do. And that there's not any, this is the number one thing that when you want to do outreach, this is what you talk about. This is what you bring people in with. There's great food. There's singing. There's people. There's families. You become part of families. You make friends, and it becomes your world. and you get to revisit it every single week. So suddenly I just had a whole group of friends in Los Angeles, and I realized, wait, any place in the world that has a Jewish community, I've got a family. I can go. I'll be at home and accepted, and I can ask for help. I can stay with people. I can get food. I can be part of something, and it's everywhere. And so that it opened up the world to me in a completely different way. It transformed the way that I view the world, where now maybe the center was your friend's house or your parents' house. But when you're in Los Angeles, then it's instead, no, I'm going to the hood. I'm going to the neighborhood, and I know now 30 people, and I could go to any one of them. And there's an incredibly deep bond that is just there because you know what everybody believes. You all are doing the same thing. And I don't think there's anything else like it. I think even for Christians, there is probably a level of distance. I don't know if you can necessarily go to another Christian and have the same type of experience. And we could talk about that. Like I'm happy to speak about that. I'm just comparing it is all.
No, I just find it fascinating. Your journey is just captivating. And I would love to go. There's so much to talk to you about. And this is going to end up being one of my longest episodes ever because we're not even half into what we're doing. And so I'm going to come back in just a minute.
Okay.
And we're going to finish up this because I would love to compare. And then I want to go into ghostwriting and all of this. But don't you apologize because what you just said, everything you just said was fascinating. I was hanging on every word. So we're going to take a break and we're going to come right back more with Josh Bains. Feliz Navidad, my friends, and get ready for the holiday season by giving your friends and family a treat with catering from, wait for it, Havana, Cuba. I had no idea they offered catering either, but what a great idea. Change up the menu with the best Cuban sandwich I've ever tasted, and fried plantains will change your life. Here's something else you didn't know. Havana, Cuba was voted one of the top 10 tamales in all of San Jose. 998cuba.com, and they have vegan, vegetarian, and gluten-free options. 387 South 1st Street in San Jose. Their catering will make this a Merry Christmas indeed with Havana, Cuba. And we're back with Josh Bains, ghostwriter and author. And I promise you, we are going to get around to that. But as we were just saying, you were saying one of the things you found about Judaism is the community. And you were saying, well, maybe we could compare, I think Christians are getting better about that simply because when we go back to the history, the idea of church was small groups in a home. That was what churches were, and that's from our background because, it all started in Judaism. And I've found that, in our church, we have a big church, but they are constantly, one of the biggest things they constantly try to push is what we call small groups, and life groups is what they call them. What pretty much would fit right in there, that your life group is who you share life with. You go to church on Sunday, but your life group is who you share life with. And they do everything they can to organize and help you organize and put you in contact with these small groups. So you would meet in each other's homes during the week. If there's something going on, a guy was talking about how his wife she fell off a horse and horseback riding, was severely injured. And the first people he called was his life group. Right? Because their family doesn't live out here. So he called his life group, and they were like taking care of the kids and bringing meals over and doing all the stuff that you were saying that you could depend on. Right? That's one of the things you love about it. And I think that's the key to a successful religion. If your religion is all about, let's condemn everybody else, and you're not taking care of the needs of your group. Right. I think you're destined to fail. But I think if you are building that community, and I love that word, if you're building that community that's part of a larger community, then I think that's why both religions are still around. Because I think in the essence of it is you have to build the community that people feel that they are having a spiritual, emotional, and sometimes physical, as in, here, let me take care of the kids, or, whatever. Those needs met. I think that's the key to it.
Yeah. I think that what Judaism comes in and says, and I'm trying to speak to what you're saying, is that the physical is actually spiritual.
Wow.
And if you want to have a relationship with God, then go change a diaper. Get your hands dirty, because that's it. That giving, that being tied to reality is, in a certain way, it's what it's all about. You're learning about something that is, let's say, transcendental, with the purpose of bringing it down into the world and working on what's here. And through that, you're working on yourself, and you're connecting yourself to other people and other beings. And really what we're supposed to do is be there for everybody. And if we're going to say as Jews that, okay, we're a light unto the nations, if you're going to use that type of phraseology, then you actually have to be that. And then don't be surprised when somebody that's not Jewish turns around and is that themselves, because wasn't that the point?
I love that. And you're right. You cannot live in a constant state of euphoria. Right?
Totally not. No.
And I try to, I've said this before and people have taken it the wrong way, but I decided, when we had children, and I had them later in life, and you have more children than I do, but I remember talking to somebody at some point and they're like, what's it like? And I said, if you can't learn to embrace the drudgery, it's going to be torture. But if you embrace the drudgery, and by what I mean is drudgery is things that we do over and over again, time after time, making dinner, washing clothes, taking baths, doing everything to let this human grow. It's drudgery, but it's also some of the most satisfying things I've ever done in my life. Right. And that's the key to it. Anybody who has a perfect body, right? If you worked out and you just have that perfect body, like you, if you have that perfect body, you understand what drudgery means, because your diet is drudgery. Your workout schedule is drudgery. You can learn to embrace it, but it's a drudgery. It's something that has to be done. And the euphoria it doesn't last.
Yeah.
I think, I freely admit there's times I see God working in so many ways, right? That if you just open your eyes and see it in so many ways. And I also recognize he's working even when I'm not noticing it.
Right.
That it's there no matter what. It's gravity.
Right.
We don't see it, but it's there.
Right. And if he wasn't, then it wouldn't be God.
Yeah.
Because by definition, God is bigger than you and bigger than me. And so we can't get from one end of the understanding to the other, one end of the world to the other, understanding what's happening. Sorry. No, absolutely fine. It's totally good. And I love that when you had brought it up, in the first segment, when you were like, and we could talk about it. I'm like, because it's just been it was so cool to see you you weren't ashamed of your religion. You just didn't know about it. It just wasn't a part of your day-to-day life. Oh, yeah. And then for the fact that you had to almost kind of leave and go on this spiritual journey and then get spammed, like you should study this, which led you back to the place which was home. And it's so, it's Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. You have to go somewhere else to realize where you really are. Right. Yeah. So I think it's fascinating. And what's it like raising your children within the religion? Because as you said, it's not like you weren't raised. It just wasn't something you were very observant in. Well, it wasn't that I didn't know it. I didn't know anything. Like there was no Shabbos, there was no Yom Kippur, there was no, the things that, let's say virtually estranged Jews would do anyway, just because that's what they've always done. So we didn't do those things either, and we didn't know about them. Mm-hmm. So that's different from somebody who, I think what you just mentioned was, a person who had a shame. Like there are plenty of people that have shame about their religion for one reason or another, and from probably across every religion. And I can only really speak to my own, but I know it's not my only my religion's problem. So it is something that, like, the path of somebody that feels shame back to being in an observant place in any religion is going to be different from the path of somebody who knows nothing. They don't have any baggage. And when I meet, like, as I became, in the fold, and I was teaching, and I was teaching English at a high school in New York. And so now suddenly I'm with all of these, New York Jews, and I'm from California, and I'm a little bit different, and I'm funny or whatever. And these guys have different issues than I've got. They have different baggage than I have. And I'm not really the one to reach them. They need somebody else that's going to take them to, like the teen center and hang out. My path was, let me learn more, teach me. And it's the complete opposite approach with them. And I would think that would be the same for Christians or Muslims or any group, where they are now repelled by the thing that you're hoping they would do. So how do you reach that type of a person? You need a very different, I'm thinking of this like teen counselor approach. Yeah. You need something like that.
Yeah. I think that's fine. So in the first segment, when I did ask if you were from New York, at some point you ended up in New York.
We lived in New York 5 years.
I'm glad I've been proven kind of right.
You're kind of right.
It wasn't just a complete aneurysm on the air
I've got a 347 area code on my phone.
Well, but I was saying this as far as raising your own children, right? I mean, that's got to be, I don't know, it's got to be joyful, right? To me, it just seems like it would be very joyful.
It is. And it's what you said it was also.
Drudgery. It's my word. You don't have to say it.
I mean, that's just reality. That you've got both. I wanted to say that, it's really like, I look, especially like now that we have YouTube or you have digital media and you can see everybody's world, on a micro level, person by person, and what they do and how they show up, what they're interested in. So there's a lot of adventure. There's a lot of excitement, and that's what we're attracted to. And that was certainly what I was attracted to. And in a certain way, little did I know that I was leading myself into a rabbit hole of normalcy. And the irony is that we all want these amazing lives, and yet you have to at some point if you want a fully amazing life and define that according to family, then at a certain point, you have to get off adventure. You have to derail yourself from a life of amazing adventure or incredible success. And you have to start to give, and you have to create something that's safe. And giving and safety are the antithesis of going off and having an adventurous life. And to be able to create that home and create something that is going to raise up somebody else, then that's suddenly not about you. It's not about what you find exciting or makes you feel successful. And you now have to create new definitions for yourself to make something else happen, that's going to be good for those people who you're in charge of. And I am not good at that. And the cool thing was, because truthfully, you have lived a life of adventure. I've lived an amazing life, but I would not say it's a life of adventure, right? But it's been an amazing life. I've got to do a lot of fun things and great things. But I think the reason you can't stay that way is, especially when you have children, is that you, as I tell my kids, I lived the majority of my life as the most selfish person I knew. I was the first thought every morning, and I was the last thought every night. What do I want? Right. What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Mm-hmm. And I said, now I'm fifth on the list, sometimes sixth, and I can share with you that the farther down on the list I go, the happier I seem to be. Mm-hmm. Right? That I think a lot of people get locked in their own brain when all they can think of is them. Right. When you start thinking, and they've done study after study, if you want to improve your physical and mental well-being, volunteer. They've done study after study on that. Doesn't matter what you volunteer. When you start giving and making someone else the focus, right, it takes all of that. I shouldn't say all, but it takes a lot of angst and anxiety away. Right. So, and that's the beautiful thing about children.
right?
Right.
Is that when you start doing that, none of us are good. You've had this conversation with your wife. I know I've had it all the time where she's like worried that she's raising serial killers. And I'm like, how can you say that? And then she'll go through, well, they're this and they're that. And I'm like, you realize it is a universal constant that all of those people who tell us how wonderful our sons are, when they're with them and we go, that's not who we get at home. and do you realize their kids, because they're kids who come over and they're perfect gem of children, they have the same thing when they go home. They're like, my kids? Really? And I'm like, that is the universal constant that when they feel protected and they feel safe and they can let go and say what they really think, well, that's going to happen to you. Well, the truth of it is it's irritating, but you should also look at it as a sign of trust. Mm-hmm. That's a sign of they will show you the stuff just like all the rest of us, right? We only want to show everybody else our best side, our best thing. Kids double that. So, they will yes ma'am where they never say yes ma'am at home.
But something got into them at home that causes them to say that with other people.
Yeah. And because they hear what you're saying, they just don't have to do it at home. It is the societal equivalent of sweatpants and a dirty t-shirt. You wouldn't wear it to dinner, but you're totally fine wearing it at home.
Right.
So look at us going off on tangential threads, which I love. I love that. Let's get back to ghostwriting, because when I first met you, that's one of the things you were doing. And I told you the first time I told you, the first time I met you, I was like, my goodness, that is, you don't even think about those things, right? First of all, how to write a book. And how you go down that and how to tell the story. Can I ask you how you got into it to start off with?
Okay. How I got into it. I guess the answer is that I always wanted to write my own book. And so I'm doing something that comes by me honestly because I've been writing for so long. But also because I've wanted to write for so long. So when it's like you want something. And so I wanted to create something. And like when I talked about Scotland, I knew that I wanted to write a book about that. But I've always really, in all honesty, had a hard time doing it. There's having this skill and then having certain fundamental roadblocks, which are really requirements to activate that skill or bring it to its fulfillment. And I have these roadblocks that have made doing what I want with my abilities hard to come by. And so it's hard for me to stick to stuff, journaling, a diary, regular writing schedule. All of those things have been extraordinarily difficult for me, to the point where I think, well, I just can't do that. And it's, it's almost like a handicap that I have to figure out how to get over or around. And so on the one hand, when I was very young, I know we were going to go to grandma's house and there was a typewriter. This has nothing to do with my grandmother. We were just about to go to her house and there was a dinosaur book, and I put the dinosaur book in front of me and I put paper in this old typewriter and I start writing, and I'm writing a book. I was copying the book word for word from this dinosaur book. But in my mind, I thought this is writing a book. So it's funny when I think of that I never thought this is what I would do for a living. And it's not, I wanted to be a paleontologist like way back then. But I guess that was in there, this idea that I'm going to create something and it would be a book. So I was way fast forward. I was, working at an SEO agency, in Greater Atlanta, and, I didn't like it, and I was looking for a way out, and I fell upon, I wasn't really a ghostwriter then. But I fell upon a ghostwriter who had as a course, and I took it, and I thought it was interesting, and then I really thought deeply about it, and I thought, this is what I do. Like this takes my highfalutin writing aims, abilities, now with my sales copy that I learned at the agency, and that was like the agency was like really getting brought down to size. from all my journalism desires to like the real world of like, let's write blogs for robots. A person's not even going to read what you're writing. I was upset that the day I heard that. But I was in that place and I discovered the concept of writing a book for a person. And so then I just started pursuing that. And then I very quickly got my first, gig working on a manuscript right after I left the agency. And that was really the beginning of it already had all my skill sets of interviewing and crafting a beginning, a middle, and end. I had done many feature articles. So it's kind of like a book is you could argue that a book is a lot of feature articles all woven together. And you just create the form, by chapter, let's say chapters 1 through 10 or 1 through 20. And there's an arc that's going to go through them, but each of them unto themselves are an arc, and each of them is a scene. Whether it's a memoir, whether it's a nonfiction, business book, memoir should be nonfiction, but whether it's a business book that's, like, Blue Ocean Strategy or The One Thing, or there these books that are pretty well known. And that also should have an arc. So putting the thinking that it takes to put that together, wasn't that different from what I was doing to create a feature story, because that arc is still in there. Have I answered your question of how I got into that was how you asked how I got into it?
Yeah. And your path into it, because I find it, again, my background, English lit major, right? And I had to write a lot of papers.
Right.
But I can tell you that the ability, what you said, is finding the arc in each sentence, finding the arc in each paragraph, turning it into an arc in each article, turning that into a book. Yeah. Is, in my opinion, I think one of the top 10 hardest things mentally you can do. I really do. Because I read voraciously. And I love when you sit back and see a true artist write, right? Somebody who has that ability to create that narrative in every sentence, every paragraph, that contributes to the book. I talk for a living. It's what I do. Writing is a completely different skill set. I've been trying to write some stuff, and you and I had talked. I've been trying to write ideas down. At one point, I'd love to write a book and stuff like that. And doing it in the limited ways I've been doing it make me realize how, wow, it has nothing to do with what I do, right? Because mine's all extraneous and extemporaneous. Yours is a path. And having to create that path is, I tell anybody, sit down and try to write 3 pages on your life and see how you do.
Right.
Right. And you will, after 2 paragraphs, you'll be like, and because we don't know how to describe as well. We don't know how to find the interesting way, and also to keep the idea in front of us. Mm-hmm. To write a nonfiction book where you're trying to tell a story arc over 200 to 500 pages, that,
I've never written anything 500. The most I've done is, it's not like 200 plus.
But I'm saying 200 plus places. Why I said 200, I don't care, 200 to 500. You're still having to maintain, as you said, that narrative. That is, I fear that if I end up doing a bad life and end up in hell, I will be consigned to write, my story for eternity, trying to figure out a narrative.
Math for eternity instead? You wouldn't be having to do, equations and stuff like that for eternity?
Math could be, I can at least figure that out at some point. But that's the thing is when you, and we're going to talk about how people how they write their story. How do you find a narrative? How do you plot out? Here's A, here's B, Z is way over there, but we're going to get there.
Right. That's, it's potentially the question. And it's something that I've been putting some thought into. And dare I say, the company that I'm making, where we create books for people or help them find their story journeys. The name that I've come upon for it, because Gary and I, we did this business accelerator together. So that's how we met each other. And so we did a lot of deep diving into what is it that we're building. And so one of the things that I recently came out with since then was the name. And the name that I would like to call what I do is Elixir. And the reason it's Elixir is because if you go to Joseph Campbell's the Power of Myth, right. So he was a famous philosopher, mythologist, and he discerned many of the many like his actual writings are very deep and dense, and they've been distilled over time by various authors so that we have a pathway that a hero takes. And you can see that in Star Wars. You can see it in a bunch of different movies, and in most books, where there's an adventure or there's some path, like Gary was saying, like you were saying, Gary. And so Elixir is towards the end of the path. And if you take the hero's journey from the beginning to the Elixir, then where you go is into the dark cave of your fears. And if you go in there, then what you pull out is the Elixir. It's different for everybody. But if you can get to the place where you don't want to go, it's the worst place to go, and you go there, then you get a prize. Prize is a funny way of saying it. You get the prize. And the prize is whatever it is that you were supposed to find, that you could only find by going on this journey, that transforms you in a way that now you can fight the final battle and win. And then you bring that back to the world that you came from as a new creation. And you're now giving to the people around you, or reassociating yourself with humanity, your group, with that. And so for me, what's exciting about the writing process, or really the story process, because I don't, in a certain way, I'm kind of multidimensional. And so I don't really care for writing or for telling a story or doing a video. But what I really care about, like what this meant so much to me when I discovered it and thought of it for the name, because I thought, this is what I do. I help people find the Elixir. And other companies, they talk about what it is that they provide, like the structure or the result. Like you find all of these, like New York Times best-selling, I have it in my title. Like, it's nice that I can have it in my title, but that's what everybody wants. We want the best-selling book. And I'm thinking, you don't want that. You want your Elixir. That's really, really what you want. And if you don't want that and you just want a best-selling book, then we're probably not the right fit, because I'm looking for the person that I can help that wants to find that Elixir in their story. And I can think of one client who I worked with a while ago. And in the interviews, there were always these aha moments that were happening where it was like therapy. And I was telling her, she would tell me things, and then I would say, well, do you ever think about this, or that it could mean that? Or do you ever think that, maybe you did this and made these decisions because really in your childhood, you were always running away from your mother, things like that. And I think all of those psychological experiences that we have, that you can, I'm thinking of, like, I don't know, whatever you read about in psychology today, it applies to, when you're trying to figure yourself out or your family out or whoever. Yeah. So those things come up and they apply to your story. And if you can delve into them, whatever the pathos is, then you'll find these gems of understanding that make meaning. And I'm all about meaning. So when you can find meaning in the story, so now you're getting close to that Elixir moment. You're getting close to those things that have some type of ultimate meaning. And I think that if you take all of the events in a story and you kind of shake them, then eventually that the most important thing it either arises out of it or it drops down deep to the bottom and you've kind of pull it out.
Yeah.
But there is a point, and the best memoirs will have some deep point that journey was leading to. And you might not have known it at the beginning. You probably didn't. It probably comes from that journeying. And when you go through that process, then things come out and you learn things. Definitely as a writer, when you're writing the story, the new things will come up. And that's where it can really help to have a ghostwriter, because the ghostwriter is not even, it's in a way, it's not even like the way that I view it. Mm-hmm. And I probably view things differently than other people, and make things way more complicated or esoteric than they need to be. Like I should really just go, just do best-selling, like we just write some best-selling books, Josh. That would really be a lot better for everybody. But going through that process of writing will lead to these amazing aha moments. As really what I guess I'm trying to say. I just derailed myself. And so yeah, the elixir, what's this about? And I was going to say that at the end where it's leading to, like, let me give you a great example.
Okay.
The great example is, Adam, and I'm forgetting his last name. So when I was in Hong Kong, I was, very affected by a book, and I'll have to put it in the show note. You do show notes? We could put it in there.
Yeah.
The name of the book is called Rivertown. And the author was an American author, and he spent 2 years, way more in China than I ever did. He was 2 years, I think the town was Fuling, and it was like somewhere in like the center of China. And he was an English teacher, and he wrote every day, which is what I have a hard time doing. He wrote every day, and he took great notes, and he made this journal of his 2 years. And at the beginning, you hear about all of his different experiences and all the ups and downs and the different cultural differences that were, all this kind of stuff, teaching English and learning Chinese. And the point of the book, which you might like, I try to reverse engineer. When did he know this in his own story, that this was the point of the story? Is that at the very end, he's built up this image of himself of having gone through all of these ups and downs. And now he knows something about China. He gets China in this unique, wonderful way that very few Westerners ever get to know. And he's walking along somewhere. I'm just recalling this from memory now, so excuse me if I get this a little bit wrong, but he ends up doing something, and I don't remember what it was, like playing music, or he was dressed a certain way. He was somewhere where he shouldn't have been. All of a sudden, there's this huge fight that erupts, and he's in this humongous fight. And his takeaway from it, that's like the end of the book. And his takeaway from it was that he didn't know anything. He realized that he did everything wrong. There was a video of it, I think, and he went through the video and he saw so many different things that he was not getting about that situation. And so his point was that he never could actually know China. He was always going to be a stranger, no matter how much he felt he was part of it, and how much he had given to become part of it. So I think he started the book, I'm going to guess that he started the book knowing that that was the end, and that was the point. But in life, we don't necessarily know what those points are when we think about writing our story. So in other words, when you think of, well, do I have a book in me? Yeah, you have a book in you. The question is which book or which story? And somewhere there's this arc in your life, and you've got to figure out, where is it? What's the story you want to tell? And what's going to have the most meaning and the most depth? And that's what you should tell. And it's probably going to be something that's the hardest thing to tell, like some part of it. That's what I tend to look for.
That was a brilliant answer. It was. I know Josh is very self-deprecating, and Josh is thinking, no, I just rambled on and that was stupid. No, it wasn't. I love aha moments. It's one of the reasons I do this. Then that people will have an aha moment or things that I found myself going, hold on, you just said, because they didn't hear it. right?
Right.
It was just coming out of their head and they didn't hear it, which is what you do. And I love the fact that you said we all have a story. We all have a book in us. Which book? I mean, when you think about that on a personal level, I mean, really not macro, but micro. When you really get on a personal level and you start thinking, what book would you tell about you and what would lead to the elixir? Because I don't know if every book would lead to an elixir.
Exactly.
You can always do the gloss. You could always just hit the surface and go there. But as you said, going into the cave and finding Darth Vader's mask. And oh, by the way, your face is in it, right? You're doing the old Star Wars thing. That is the elixir. And
they took that exactly. Like, that's why they did that. They did it on purpose because that's the image.
From Joseph Campbell. And it is the hardest thing to do and probably would be the most rewarding. I think.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to, what Thoreau, the unexamined life is not worth leading, I believe, really taking a hard, long look at yourself and tying it back into how we started this. I think religion, I know my religion is constantly asking you to look at who you are.
Right.
And where are you and what are your motives and what is your purpose? What is it, and trying to derive that, and going down that and trying to find that story to tell. It's amazing because I know there's people listening right now and I know you guys are having the thought, what would be my story and what scares me?
Yeah.
I love the imagery you did on that. And I think it would be easier for setback. You can think of your loved ones and your friends, and I bet you can figure out what scares them maybe before they could figure it out or want to go into it. Right?
Right.
I think that's how do people get there? Say they wanted to write a story and they're like, okay. And I think this is what it's going to be. When because as far as I understand how you do it, you do like a month or two of interviews.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And you have learned the questions to ask to get people to start opening up and finding that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to want it. You have to want that experience and you have to want to say those things. And I've worked with people that really do want to do it and people that don't. And there's a big difference between what you create for them, if you create anything, by the end of that. I'm just trying to think of how to answer this because some people want to talk and it's wonderful to be listened to. And it's true that I can see things that they can't. I can uncover things that you just need help. You just need somebody else there. If I wish for a ghostwriter for me all the time. I would love a ghostwriter. That would make, I get my books done.
You could subcontract anything out, right?
Right. Yeah. Like they can kind of do the hard beginning stuff and I'll just revise it and I'm really good at that and that would be great. But the questions it's definitely the fun part. It's definitely for me. It's not that I don't like writing, but writing's hard. And there's a lot of cerebral use happening while I'm doing the writing, which is just part of it. But the interviewing, that's just easy when I compare that to the other part. And it's generally very enjoyable. And people really like being interviewed. Most people have not had the experience of being interviewed. And so when they have that, it's like they're breathing for the first time. They're breathing out these stories or these things that they want to say. And in many cases, I think they don't know what they want to say. They know they know what brought them there and they have some idea. But, just like me, when I answer one of your questions, I don't really know what I'm about to say. Mm-hmm. Like I know that I have certain data, but, I have a certain ability and then things just come up. I can't control what's coming up. And I don't know exactly where that's coming from, but it's somewhere in here and it's coming out. And then when I'm guiding that, to flip these comparisons around. If I'm talking to somebody else and I'm helping that person, I could say, I'll help you, Gary. If I was going to help you, Gary, write your book, which you should, of course, write, then we would talk about, what's it about, by the way? What is your book about?
What I was going to do is, the things I've learned in 36,000 hours of broadcasting and over 300 celebrity interviews.
That's amazing.
So that's the thing. And I've just been, I've been brain dumping my memories of things, of interviews I've done, and the things I remember, again, not exactly. I wouldn't say this is exactly what they said, but I do remember it well enough, and I bounce it off like my partner I've done the show with, and hey, remember this? We've talked about this and that part, and things I've gleaned from those interviews. Right? Yeah. I sat back and said, here's what I've learned. You don't know what I learned from Garth Brooks? This is what I've learned from Garth Brooks. Right. If you want to know what I learned from Keith Urban, this is what I learned from Keith Urban when he told me this story.
That would be a really super popular book.
Yeah. And, well, thank you. And it's finding that, but it's, I don't know. I don't know if it's an Elixir book. I don't know.
That's where I was going to go. And that's the question of which book, because the first book is this, standard. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a standard, A to Z compilation. And there's a few pages on each person. From however you want to divide that up. Mm-hmm. You say you're finding, what you talked about. You could repeat that over and over. It's a very easy book to write. You actually can because you're just talking about what you've done.
Yeah.
And what's there.
Yeah.
The hard book to write is your memoir of that. And they're totally different books.
See, and it is. And going down the, I don't shy away from any of the things in my story that has made me who I am, and I have talked about my father and his travails and, and the things growing up desperately poor and all of that stuff. And it's so I don't, but I know there's even something there trying to be honest with myself. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's still something there that I'm dancing around. And the truth of it is, I don't know what it is. I can honestly tell you, I don't know what it is. So,
I think the only way to find it is to do the work.
Yeah.
Is to start talking about those stories and then you could back into it. Like it's possible if you have enough time with it, you might find that thing you're afraid of or that thing you're dancing around, however you call it. And I would think that you might even know like what quadrant of your life it's in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
yeah. I could see that. I think it's a fascinating journey and thought process and seeing, and I can see also how you do it really well because again, you're very easy to talk to. And one of the things I try to do, somebody asked me, what do you try to do? When I do interviews, I try to do them with no barriers. And I don't mean that on the guest. I mean that for me.
Right.
That when you talk to me, I've got no barriers to you.
Right.
And there's nothing I will hide away. There's nothing I'll go down any road you want to go down. Right.
Right.
And I'll share my thoughts and takes on anything that you want to go down. And whether we agree or disagree, at least we're going to have the conversation.
Right.
Right. And keep it civil because frankly, I don't like shouting. I've got no interest in shouting. I tell that to my kids all the time. No, I don't want to go that route because I don't think anything gets done.
Right.
And then we all end up feeling bad afterwards. So why are we doing that?
Right.
So when I'm talking with you, that's the thing. I can see when you were saying, when you're doing the interviews, I see that you try to do the same thing as far as whether you're willing to share some stuff, but you don't want it to be too much because you want to keep them focused on them.
Yeah. It's not about me.
Mm-hmm. But you have to approach it with no barriers, right? They have to feel.
Yes, but I do that more. I compare it much more to coaching or therapy. It really feels like that. And it, like, again, I'm going to use you as an example because it's just a lot easier to have a real, a dummy.
A real dummy. And, I've made
it. And rather than something, abstract. I don't have anything to go with on you, but if you were going to talk about a time in your life when XYZ, then we would talk about that. But then I would start asking you more, like if I really wanted to open that up into something that's deep, then I would have to start asking you questions that would peel layers back of, what did you think about that? Well, why did you do that? What were you, how did you feel about, when she said this, then how did you feel? Why did you think you felt that way? And once you start asking those kinds of questions, you really start getting introspection happens. New things come out. And you were never going to do that yourself. Like, why would you ever do, like, you wouldn't even think to do that. And I think if you had a piece of paper next to you that was asking you, I mean, you could, if you had a lot of, ganas, then you would open that up and you would answer those questions. But it's much more powerful when you actually have a person who is there and cares about you a little bit and is trying to get this out of you to create these kinds of elicit these reactions, which work themselves very neatly into a story. And that's the difference between a ghostwriter and your therapist or your coach, because I'm not here to help you.
I get that. And again, I will go back into it that I think we're on the same side of the street, because when I say no barriers, and that also can be as construed as no fear. And you have to have that no fear to ask these questions, and you have to be prepared for the answer. It's one thing for them to be prepared for the answer, but when you ask some questions, the old adage goes, don't ask a question you don't really want to know the answer to.
Right.
And you're asking questions that you don't know where they're going to go. You don't know where it's going to go. And that's amazing to me.
Right. Well, and because what I learned in journalism school was that what sells, and when I say sell, I mean what works, is life and death. Life and death is the only thing anybody really wants to read about. And that's why the news is what it is. That's why it's always so insane. Mm-hmm. It's not because it's really that insane. It's because what people read, what they'll stop for, is something exciting. So I'm looking for the most exciting thing that you will say, that I can get you to say. And that is probably going to be emotional, and it's going to be something that is meaningful to somebody. It could be the person you're talking about. It could be you. It could be the situation. And there's different parts to every story. There's what happened, which is the description part. And you can make a very emotional story with description alone, if that's what you're trying to do. And then there's your reaction. There's your human side of the story. And that's how you felt about it and how you thought about it. And that might be very emotional. It might be kind of deadpan, but then like there's this book that I really enjoy, that does this perfectly, the Glass Castle. And it's really about abuse, on most levels, but the author was so abused in her own unique way that she didn't write it from a perspective of somebody that knew that it was happening. And so there's this deadpan way that the whole book is written, which is very unnerving. At least this is how I found it. Mm-hmm. And some people love the book. People hate the book. But it took the author's husband telling her, no, this was bad. This wasn't okay, because the way that she recorded everything in her internally was that this is just what my life was. And what uniquely comes out of that, I think, are two things. And some people might hate this. First, you wrote about the desert, and I grew up going to the desert. So I really resonate with those parts of the book. Mm-hmm. I can feel myself in the book, in those scenes. And, there were really terrible things that happened. And then there's also a lot of love, which is also communicated by those people who did those terrible things also. So you have this dichotomy. In the book is kind of like at war with itself. But that's real. That's actually how we experience things.
Yeah.
You have a father who did wonderful things. You have a father that did horrible things. And, thank God my dad just did wonderful things. So it's easy for me to say this. Mm-hmm. And I actually recently didn't get a book deal because I had, thank God, never gone through abuse. And I was number 2. And the reason I didn't make it was because, no, we need somebody that was abused. So I'm fine with not doing that one. Okay. I'll let that one go.
High fives.
Yeah. So it far be it for me to speak with these things with authority, but I can speak as the reader. And as the reader, my experience of the book, what I personally am taking away is that you can have this dichotomy and you can make beautiful moments out of something that's ugly. There are beautiful moments and then there are ugly moments. And you have to deal with both of them. And by her being completely unemotional in the way that she writes, at least allowed me as the reader to see the beauty part, the parts with beauty as beautiful and as wonderful and great relationship moments. And then the parts that were not as not, without any kind of her telling me what was weird was having an author not give me her opinion of what had happened to her. And I think that's very unique. And you could look at that as a sign of the effect of abuse, or you could look at it as a literary technique in a memoir. And I tend to look at it as the latter, although you could look at it either way. But now I've lost my train of thought.
No,
I'm sorry.
We're talking because I was enjoying that because it led me to think of this when you read. Do you read a lot? Do you have time to read?
No, not a lot. Not as much as Stephen King would say that I should be reading. Stephen King says, if you don't have time to read, you don't have time to write, which is what I tell all of my clients. And currently, I am currently reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
I've heard of it. I've never read it.
And what can I say about that? I mean, that's what I'm reading right now, and I'm enjoying it. And
do you read read any nonfiction?
That is nonfiction. It's
I mean fiction. I mean fiction, not nonfiction.
Oh, do I read? I have read. I do like fiction. I don't have time for a lot of it. I recently stumbled onto an old Tom Wolfe book. Because of the journalism background that I've got, I really became attracted. I was always just into nonfiction. And my heroes in writing are George Plimpton and Gay Talese and Tom Wolfe, and the crew that was those beat guys,
Jack Kerouac,
yes,
and all of those guys, and George Plimpton, who was infamously wrote for Sports Illustrated, and he tried to be an NFL quarterback in preseason for the Lions, paper Lions, and that's just that whole experience journalism. Experience.
So that's that's some of my favorite writing, and that's again generally. I mean, I don't know about Tom Wolfe, but that's generally. Some of his stuff.
Tom Wolfe will write stuff. I mean, that's his quintessential book.
That's nonfiction. I'm just thinking. There's this one that's about
Bonfire of the Vanities. Bonfire of the Vanities from Wolfe.
Right. Yeah.
That's fiction.
Right. But, then I started reading, Moby Dick. That's still certain things I read for the writing itself to understand what great writing is. And that is, that's written in what I think is on a literary level is called the high style of English language writing, which is still that's 1700s. I'm not a lit. I took history and theory as a novel for 5 credits in college and got decimated.
I was the only English lit.
Trying to keep up with it.
Call me Ishmael.
Exactly. But the book is astoundingly funny. Is what I It's just there are parts of it that are really, really funny,
and it's still funny today. As you're saying, stuff that was written so long ago will still make you laugh out loud today.
Right.
And that's the thing. I always encourage people to don't read Shakespeare, watch Shakespeare be performed.
Right.
Because it will make you laugh even today.
Right.
And so I love that. I'm more of a fiction person. I freely
Okay.
admit. I'll read some nonfiction, but I am enhanced and entranced by stories.
Right.
You know? And right now I'm reading the latest, Robert Galbraith is her pen name, otherwise known as J.K. Rowling.
Okay.
And she's created this, detective series. And I think this is the 4th or 5th book. And what I love about J.K. Rowling is, especially you see the Harry Potter, you watch her grow as an author.
Right.
You read the first book and just put it down and go pick up the 7th book or 8th book, whatever it is, and open it up middle of the book and read. And you can tell, well, that's the same author, but my gosh, look what she's done. And it's so it's fun reading this because she started off at that level, but it was the first really detective thing, and watching her grow in this. And I found the books wonderful, but seeing them, going to the 4th and 5th book, I think they made a TV series out of it and put it on Netflix.
Okay.
So great. If you just want to cheat over that, but
yeah, I'm thinking 2 things. One is that every author who I work with is, they get better at writing. Like when they write, and they tend to be writing with me in some way. And whenever I see, like, their writing will improve, especially if we're doing editing, because then they'll see what I'm looking for, what I'm taking away, what I'm leaving in. And then they start coming up with their own style about how to do that, which generally makes it better. They become better. And the other thing I was going to say was, do you listen to classical music? This is a totally different reference.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I played French horn.
Well, that's amazing. Have you done that on your show?
Huh?
You need to do that on your show.
I don't play it on my show. I played it.
Bring in some kind of like symphonic French horn player, and then you could have a whole show.
Yeah, I could talk to him about it. I haven't played French horn since, I don't know, I was 20, 21 years old. I mean, when I got out of college, I was done with, even before I got out of college, I was done because I had risen to the level of my own incompetence, right? So I was an all-state French horn player for 4 years in a row. And felt pretty confident about that. And then I went to this small school, Troy State University, and I joined the band, and I saw these amazing musicians. And it occurred to me that this wasn't Juilliard. This wasn't the Berklee College of Music. This wasn't Vanderbilt or Belmont. This was Troy State. And these people kicked my butt from left side to the right side. So again, you reach your own level of competence and you go, yeah, there's no there for me. Peace out. Right. So, but talking to a symphonic, I would love to. I would love to find out, because it's just like anything else. The pressures are insane because there's always somebody coming out who will take your place for less. It's like being a pro athlete, Right. And you're one injury, you're one fever blister, you're one broken finger away from being replaced.
Wow.
So again, it's finding those little things that you go, holy moly. But see, I love, you were asking if I love classical music. What was the thought process behind
Well, because Mozart, so we were like doing, there was a family trip where we started doing the biographies of classical musicians. And Mozart, one of the things that I remember hearing was, if you listen to, I believe it's his, I'm not a Bucky in this, but I believe it's his string concertos. I know it's the violin things that he did. Yeah. He has a series of them. And if you listen to the first one, you hear you hear a certain level of competency. And then to the second one and the third one and the fourth and the fifth, he said that there's this astounding jump from the first to the second, and definitely by the third. So by the third one, the complexity and beauty and immeasurable quality of it is like it's like years had passed between the first one and the third one, but only some months had passed from him writing the first to the second and third. And so I made a point to listen to them all in a row. And when I did that, I got like, oh, wow. I could really hear how something happened. The way that he dealt with the composition, radically changes. And, it was just, one of there must be some takeaway from that. I don't know what it is.
Well,
there must be some elixir to get out of that. And,
it's the texture.
And if I was writing the scene, it would be something, but on one foot, I'm not sure.
The Malcolm Gladwell effect, the 10,000 hours, the more you do it, the more confident you get. And then it comes into diminishing returns, which is the funny thing about life is that, you get better at it, you get better at it, you get better at it. Frank Sinatra was really good, but if you saw Frank Sinatra performing at 71, he wasn't, at 50, he was amazing. 71, things had started to slip. So there is that arc, as you were saying, that, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going, and then time and gravity take over. Yeah. And that's called as you probably know from your lit days, that's the denouement. Mm-hmm. The denouement is after the story's over, after the climax, and now you're going to have this ebbing away period of tying up of loose ends. And, that's just part of life too. Yeah. And that's the next part of the journey. I mean, I saw a guy a couple of weeks ago who I remembered this big, burly guy who liked to fight, but that was 30 years ago when he was in his 30s and 40s. And now I saw him and he's 70 and he's kind of this shriveled up old man and you wouldn't know his backstory. Right. He was the like to fight guy. And now you just look at him and you go, oh, look at you, sweet old man. I'm like, yeah, it's now he's on a completely different journey. Right. My friend, you've given me my Joe Rogan moment. This has been my longest podcast because I've just enjoyed the conversation so much. JoshBains.com. Find out the story you have. Which story is it? Which book are you willing it's a fascinating question, huh? And if you made it to the end of this podcast, I'm happy about this podcast. People at 80% listen to the entire podcast. Wow. So this is a challenge for you all, but this has been so fascinating as I knew it would be. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Gary. I really appreciate this as my first foray into, being a podcast guest. You nailed it. And they all get easier from here on out.